Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to our second Fireside chat on a resurrection story from the last chapter of John's Gospel, the 21st chapter. You may remember that last time when we looked at this, we examined how Peter and some of the apostles decided to go fishing, and they fished all night. They didn't catch anything. And then this stranger, they don't recognize him at first, appears on the shore of the lake of Tiberias and asks them if they've caught anything, and they say nothing. And he says, well, why don't you cast your nets on this side of the boat? They do, and they get this incredible catch of fish. John whispers to Peter, "It's the Lord." And Peter jumps in the water and goes towards Jesus. And of course, when they get there, there's a barbecue, a fire lit. And Jesus says, "Give me some of the fish." And he fixes them breakfast. They have bread, which they break and share. And then they have this wonderful barbecued fish. So that's the first part of the story. And remember that we said that a focus of that story and this second part of the story is forgiveness. The Easter gift, the resurrection gift of forgiveness. Peter, and it focuses on Peter. Peter loves Jesus. He loves him so much that he proclaimed at the Last Supper, even if all the others were to abandon you, I will never abandon you. And Jesus predicted that Peter, out of fear, would deny him 3 times, which he did. And when he did for the 3rd time, the cock crowed, and Peter remembered what Jesus said and was devastated. So this is the 3rd appearance, resurrection appearance in John's Gospel of Jesus, and it's to the disciples. So they've had breakfast, and this is how the story continues, beginning at verse 15. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, they're going for a walk now, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time he said to Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." Jesus said to him the 3rd time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter felt hurt because he said to him the 3rd time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and to go wherever you wished. But when you grow older, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go." He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After this, Jesus said to him, "Follow me." So that's the story. The second part of this resurrection account, this resurrection story, is a story about a walk, a question that's asked 3 times, and a mission that's given 3 times. One of my dearest friends is a Christian brother from Australia. And some of the parishioners who traveled with me on our pilgrimage to Ireland met him. His name is Brother Pat McCarthy. Good Irish name. And Pat and I talk by phone as well as email, but we talk by phone every few weeks. Recently, he sent me an email with the location of a song recorded by one of his old boys. So when someone in Australia refers to one of the old boys, he's referring to one of his students he taught when he was a younger man. And the name of the song was Father, Forgive Them. Here are the words of the chorus of that song, which struck me, and I think shed light and tell us much about the significance of this passage we just heard from John's Gospel. So here are the words of the chorus. He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. In those few words, he proved that everything he said to us was true. In those last moments of his life, so filled with insult, loss, and pain, he spoke the words that brought forgiveness, so this world might rise again. Those are the words. Some of the last words that Jesus spoke on the cross before he died were words of forgiveness and mercy. Now, and that's in a sense, in a very real sense, what Jesus is speaking to Peter when he asks him 3 times, do you love me? He's drawing the pain and the poison of denial and betrayal out of him. That's the risen Jesus's act of forgiveness. Debbie Thomas, who is a children and family life minister at a church in Palo Alto, reflecting on this particular resurrection story, remarks, what I find both searing and instructive in this story is the way Jesus saves Peter by returning him to the source of his shame. He does not wrap the humiliated disciple in gauze. He does not avoid the hard conversation. He does not pretend that Peter's denials did not happen and did not wound. But neither does Jesus preach, condemn, accuse, or retaliate. He feeds. He feeds Peter's body, and then he feeds Peter's soul. He surrounds the self-loathing disciple with tenderness and safety, inviting him to revisit his shame for the sake of healing, restoration, and commissioning. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Feed my sheep. It's all about love. We cannot pretend you did not deny me. We cannot pretend you don't love me. So how can I help you understand you do love me? Number one, by asking that hard question, Peter, do you love me? And when you respond, you know all things, you know I love you. then giving you a way to express that love, giving you a mission. Feed my lambs, tend my sheep, feed my sheep. St. Ignatius of Loyola, in the final contemplation of the spiritual exercises, which is called the contemplation to love as God loves, says this in a pre-note. Love expresses itself more in action than in word. My father's paraphrase of this was his saying, talk is cheap, whiskey costs money. Love expresses itself in deeds. Debbie Thomas concludes her reflection with these words. Peter's shame meets Jesus's grace, and Jesus's grace wins. That is the gospel story in a nutshell. As writer and research professor Brené Brown puts it, shame cannot survive being spoken. Meaning, shame cannot survive the living word. Shame cannot tolerate the resurrection. When shame encounters the God who is love, it burns to ash and scatters. So here are some questions for you to ponder, for you to reflect on these days. First, how have you denied who you are or what you value and believe in your life? Second, how have you experienced the mercy and forgiveness of the risen Lord in your life? I remember those wonderful words of the female character in the movie Tender Mercies, when she tells Mac, who's a recovering alcoholic and a country western songwriter and singer, she says to him, every night before I go to bed, I thank God for his mercies. And she's referring to God bringing Mac into her life and, of course, for her little son. So how have you experienced the mercy and forgiveness of the risen Lord in your life, in little ways and perhaps in big ways? Third, what mission is the risen Christ giving you during these days of the stay-at-home mandate of the coronavirus? I'm sure we're all experiencing cabin fever. We're anxious to get back together, to get on with life, to get back to work, to get back to school, we're impatient. The word patient comes from the Latin word to suffer. It's difficult to be patient, to wait until the time is right, until it is safe. So what mission is the risen Christ giving you during these days of the stay-at-home mandate of the coronavirus? And lastly, fourthly, how is your love for the risen Lord and your loved ones expressed in concrete actions of love? Now that's a lot to ponder, but I invite you to embark on that, to reflect on it, ponder these things in your heart. So I want to close with this brief prayer. Christ, our Redeemer, mend our nets and guide our boats as we make our way across the oceans of our lives. May we become your church of forgiveness and peace, the place where no one is beyond your grace or love. Help us to overcome our own hurts and anger, our sense of unworthiness and shame, in order to be ministers of your mercy to others. And so I hope you all will continue to stay grateful, stay hopeful, and especially stay safe. God bless you all during this Easter season.